Thanks for joining, everyone. If everyone online could mute, and we will have some time at the end for questions.
No, Jeff, I can have a little word with her.
There we go.
Okay. This is the monthly 1STL Sustainability Lab. My name is Anna Cott, and I'm a sustainability planner at East West Gateway Council of Governments. And 1STL is a collaborative sustainability initiative for the bi-state St. Louis region. So we have these monthly labs. This one is a topic that's been in the news a lot recently, flooding in East St. Louis and stormwater management. So feel free to sign up for a monthly newsletter if you're interested in staying in the loop about future labs. And we also have more information about it at 1stl.org. Our next sustainability lab for September, they're always on the last Tuesday of the month. This will be about our regional climate action plan. And that's something Aaron and I are working on with a grant from the EPA to create a climate action plan for the St. Louis metropolitan statistical area. So we really need input from every county in our MSA. And I also want to thank our speakers. We have John O'Donnell today from the Heartlands Conservancy to share about their planning that they're doing in the East St. Louis area. Allison Joyce is here from Missouri Botanical Gardens Earthways Center and is going to be sharing about rainscaping and some grants available from MSD. And then Shawn Sullivan, we've also invited because I asked Shawn for an update about the sewer trunk line repairs going on in Heartland's planning area, and he offered to come and share about it today. So we're really grateful for that and looking forward to hearing from all of our speakers. So I guess we'll start with John. If you wouldn't mind coming to this laptop so the people online can see you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's
all
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll swap around, I guess. I'll just sit. I guess the camera's on this one. You're on.
Yeah, just
We can see you up there. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Donnell with Heartlands Conservancy. It's nice to meet you. I will be giving you an update on the Prairie du Pont and Judy's Branch watershed plan that we've been working on since about 2021 now. I'm the water programs manager with Heartlands Conservancy, and I'll give you guys a brief update of who we are and then talk about what we've been working on. Sure. I was on this slide, or
It should be on that one.
oh, there we go. Okay. So Heartlands Conservancy is a regional not-for-profit organization. We were founded in 1989 as an RC&D in southwestern Illinois, which was a resource conservation and development organization. It was a branch of the US government at a certain time when they were all phased out. We stuck around as a nonprofit and reincorporated after that to maintain our mission of conserving, connecting, and restoring the diverse natural and cultural resources that sustain people and communities of southwestern Illinois. And so what we do is we work for clean water, access to the outdoors, healthy ecosystems, and resilient communities in southwestern Illinois. We have three branches. We have a land, water, and communities department. Our land conservation department works on conserving important ecological, agricultural, recreational, and cultural places. We also create places for community enjoyment, such as parks, gardens, and trails. We do conservation easements and land management, controlled burns, and other things like that, invasive species removal. Our water department, that's me, we work in partnership with public agencies and residents, protecting and managing water in southwestern Illinois through green infrastructure, flood and climate adaptation strategies, and healthy watershed initiatives. And then we have our communities department that works with community planning, parks, trails, planning, mapping, climate adaptation, community engagement. So watershed planning. Our organization has a long history of watershed planning. We've currently already completed 8 watershed plans in the southwestern Illinois area, many of them in Madison County, but a few of them in St. Clair County as well. all the way from Piasaw Creek watershed up in the north, which is kind of the extent of our range up there, down to the lower Silver Creek watershed in the south. And what we normally do is we do watershed plan and then apply for funds for watershed plan implementation. This project is a little bit different in that we have some funds up front for some demonstration and implementation projects as well. And you can see down here, the Prairie DuPont and Judy's Branch watershed is what we're focusing on today. So here's the Prairie DuPont and Judy's Branch watershed exterior kind of area. A watershed, for those who don't know, is basically the basin from which all the water that flows within this area is going to go flowing through it and end up in the exterior point, which is kind of the Mississippi River down here, basically. All the water that hits outside of it is going to end up going either north or south through other major streams and tributaries. It's the general idea of a watershed. There are larger and smaller watersheds. All of the Mississippi River has a watershed that covers almost a third of the United States. But for our purposes, we focus on these smaller, what are called Huck 10 watersheds that are around the size of a county or smaller. This watershed is a combination of the Prairie DuPont watershed, which is our focus, and the St. Clair portion of the Judy's Branch watershed. The Madison County portion of the Judy's Branch watershed was completed in a previous plan, the American Bottom watershed plan. All of our plans are on our website, so if you're ever curious to learn more about what they are, what they look like, or what's in them, you can go to our website and all of them are listed. You can click on our map and see, go on that map that I showed you previously and click on it. It'll show you the watershed plan for each of those completed watersheds. First and foremost, I'd like to make a statement of acknowledgement that this watershed plan and a lot of the work within it is the direct result of residents' continued work, self-organizing and advocating for their community. This plan is based on the efforts of many in an attempt at collecting a lot of the recommendations from local stakeholders and organizations, as well as federal agencies. And again, this document is limited to what information is available at the time of writing. Upcoming local and federal maps, models, plans, and projects should be considered when referring back to this plan in the future. So, we will be completed with this plan by the end of the year. After that, it's up to the people in the community to kind of keep it moving forward and implement the plan as much as they can. Here's an example of kind of what some of the acute issues that people are experiencing, pumps in poor condition, severe bank erosion upstream of the area, driveway culverts and ditches blocked, not letting water flow through them, ditches filled with sediment. So I'll give you a brief background on what this is and maybe what a watershed plan is for. A watershed plan looks at a watershed, go back to this and show you, and says, okay, it's an IEPA funded project considering non-point source pollution. When you're considering point source pollution, that's a factory that's putting out pollution. You can say they're putting too much out and you can say you need to limit that. That's a relatively easy thing for EPA to do. When you're considering non-point source pollution, it's everything that falls in a watershed. It's everything that's in the stormwater as it's running off of the streets and the gutters into the storm drains. It's everything coming through the streams, like the sediment and nutrients that are coming through and ending up in the Mississippi River, going down and causing the dead zone in the Gulf. It's the sediment that's flowing into those streams due to erosion and then clogging up ditches and canals and infrastructure in this other part of the watershed. So it's kind of a regional way of looking at water pollution and water issues, stormwater included in that. And a stormwater is a big component of this because of the acute issues that people are experiencing. In other watersheds and agricultural areas, soil erosion and nutrient erosion or nutrient pollution coupled with that soil erosion are much larger components, talking about cover cropping and other things. So with this one, a lot of what our discussion is around kind of that floodplain infrastructure, dealing with moving that stormwater away from residents as much as possible and the pollution that is within those stormwaters. So funding and oversight. The Illinois EPA is providing grant funds for this project. We applied for grant funds under the 319 Clean Water Act that the EPA provides funding for. Additional state funding will cover the design and construction of some projects to demonstrate best management practices of the stormwater and pollution in the area. The IEPA is providing close oversight, including the required approval of these strategies that we will plan to implement, as well as the project schedule. The project team, I'm with Heartlands Conservancy under project management, resident and stakeholder engagement, and working on the water resource inventory and the plan itself. We have Added Dimension LLC, which is helping us with public engagement and meeting facilitation. Andreas Consulting Services did a stream inventory for us. Hennigan and Associates in Construction Services has been working with us on designing and implementing and actually constructing these practices, these demonstration projects that I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And then the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center has been doing water quality modeling and monitoring for us. That'll be included in our plan at the end. And the SIUE Civil Engineering Department has done 1D water flow modeling for us as well in the watershed. So here's just kind of a flow chart of how our planning process has worked for this plan. We have 3 separate committees that we have met with over the course of this plan many times now. We have a technical advisory committee that Shawn here is on, full of members from state, federal, municipal, engineers for the city of Cahokia Heights, engineers for the city of East St. Louis, members from Illinois EPA, USGS, and other stakeholders that can provide comments and insight on recommendations on the plan as we move along. We have a watershed planning committee that is directly guiding the development of recommendations that will be included in the plan and promoting community engagement to these events. This committee itself is made up of mostly residents that we've recruited from the community, and same thing, there's a BMP, a Best Management Practices Demonstration Projects Committee. So they have worked on ranking the projects, and I can tell you a little bit more about what they did, but this is also 100% resident filled committee. So the residents are having a very important impact on what is being done in their community. We're taking all of their feedback on the plan as we go along, and then consolidating it together in the plan itself. Some unique considerations in this area. So like I mentioned before, focus on the acute impacts to residents. Much of this is chronic flooding of low-lying areas in the floodplain of East St. Louis and city of Cahokia Heights in particular. There's some specific neighborhoods that I'll mention. The neighborhoods Ping Pong, Parkside, and Piat Place, and Edgemont in Cahokia Heights and East St. Louis have been kind of chronically flooded and are dealing with chronic sewer overflows in kind of combination with those flooding issues. And sewer system improvements. So water flow relies on the constant maintenance of this infrastructure. This infrastructure was built during a peak population in the industrial area of East St. Louis, which is no longer in. There's been a population decline, there's been an industrial decline. This has led to shifts in groundwater levels and shifts in population that, unfortunately, the infrastructure has not been maintained as well as it should have been for the past many years now. So there's a brief comment on the funding that we got. So we have around $700,000 for this BNP demonstration project fund through IPA funding. We will be getting an additional 1.5 million through an earmark secured by Senator Durbin through US EPA. And Heartlands will be managing that earmark. This is separate from the many other pots of money that are kind of flowing to this area that will be going directly to some of those municipalities of Cahokia Heights and East St. Louis and St. Clair County. So I talked about BMP demonstration projects. So a best management practice is something that you implement to try to reduce pollution in a stream. If a stream is eroding, you can do things to manage the erosion of that stream, adding in stream bank buffers, riffles, other things like that. If you're dealing with excess water, you can do things like sediment basins and other projects. In this area, it ended up being almost entirely municipal infrastructure because that's the highest need. So, and how did we get to that? Which was the BMP committee developed the guidelines for which projects we wanted to focus on. So this committee of residents, we talked to and found out what were their goals that they wanted to achieve with these projects. What were the minimum requirements for a project and what made the project good and important to spend money on. We had many sessions with this committee with engineer of Hennigan Associates to kind of explain what sorts of projects could be implemented and where they could be implemented. We reached out to the community at large to have people propose projects, and then we had the BMP committee review these proposed projects after we helped kind of summarize them and score them. The engineers reviewed the feasibility of these projects, and we put together a ranked list with the BMP committee itself put together a ranked list of projects that we submitted to IPA for approval. That list has been approved, and now we're in the process of working with our engineers on actually going out and trying to get some of those projects completed and constructed. So a big part of this planning process is where's the water causing trouble. The project team met with stakeholders throughout 2021 and 2022 on an individual and group basis to understand their relationship with flooding and wastewater through individual and community meetings, through a flood survey and workshops. So here's some examples. We met individually with people outdoors when COVID protocols were still in place, and had people, work on marker maps where they directly marked on the maps where they're having issues with flooding, with wastewater issues. We had a flood survey conducted online and in paper and through a mobile app that people could use in English and Spanish. And here's what some of the kind of marker map looked like at the end, where people had marked off areas where they say, the road is collapsing here, there's flooding issues going on, there's wastewater issues, this whole area over here is flooding, they say. And so we took all that, digitized it, and now we have a GIS layer with all of the kind of citizen feedback on where the critical flooding areas were according to them, that we will incorporate with the other data sources that we have, like the FEMA flood maps that are in the process of being updated. So we're using the old ones for now. If they're updated before this plan completes, we will include them. And so we have this larger map now, the whole watershed, with kind of these focus areas still considered of where people have reported flooding, wastewater issues, pump station repairs needed, and things like that. I'm going to show you a few maps now, just kind of showing kind of what will be going into that final document, and showing different examples of how this kind of flooding issue came to be. So this is a historic conditions map showing in 1888 overlaid on the current watershed, showing, this is the floodplain. This is the area above the floodplain and the bluffs, Belleville, parts of that up here. And you can see there were lots of lakes. This is a floodplain. This was built over, this is where the Mississippi River kind of meandered through over the course of its lifetime. It's currently in its place over there, but it used to be other places. These soils are often hydric soils in this watershed. So that means they were and are, wetland type soils. They are often covered in water, and they do not drain water very well. And combined with some other maps, I don't know if I have it, but there's a high water table in this area below the bluffs, and these kinds of hydric soil areas just indicate that this is a floodplain, and water flows through here differently. Above the bluffs, water flows to the streams, can overtop sometimes, but once it hits this, floodplain area, water modeling kind of breaks down a little bit, and you really need to manage the flow of that water intentionally. You can't just let it flow wherever it wants, because it's not going to go where you need it to go if you don't really work hard to make it happen. Here are the current 100 and 500 year FEMA flood maps. You can see this area is not showing up in the flood maps. Hopefully that can be fixed, but one of the limitations of those FEMA flood maps is they are based on overtopping of streams and canals. And so a lot of the flooding that happens in these areas is inundation based. Water falls in the area, but it can't leave. It can't leave because of the stormwater systems not flowing properly. It can't leave because of the canals not being maintained properly. And so this FEMA flood map doesn't necessarily capture the extent of the flooding that is currently happening in this area. And here's an example of where we're going with our recommendations. So we have taken a look at public and private parcels and said, okay, these are areas where projects could go in that could help capture and store some of the water, slow and spread some of the water, drain and flow are kind of our main focus point. So we want water to flow through the infrastructure as it should, which means point repairs, lift stations, pump stations, separation of combined sanitary and storm sewers. We want, if there can be extended buffers on the stream banks upstream of these areas, you can slow the water down before it carries a lot of that sediment and nutrient and filling up some of those ditches. We want less impervious pavement above the bluffs so the water can slow down and be captured, as well as maintaining and improving wetlands in the area itself so that they can function properly of capturing water and cleaning some of the water up. So where are we right now? We're working on goals and recommendations after meeting with the Watershed Planning Committee. We're working on these projects that were selected and scoped by the Best Management Practices Committee. We're hoping to continue coordination with this TAC committee full of our municipal and federal and state stakeholders, And we're working on landowner agreements and final details for implementation of some of those demonstration projects. Going back to this map, those purple lines and those red lines, so those are areas that have been identified as critical areas for storm and sanitary sewer improvements. Before anything else can be done, our engineers identified that smoke testing and televising has to happen so that we can identify where those point repairs have to occur. So over the next month or so, we will be going out and our engineers will be going out and conducting smoke testing and televising of these areas. And then once we have those specific point repair locations marked off, we can then maybe use some of those extra 1.5 million earmark funds to go back through and implement those point repairs that were identified. Or if the city municipality is ready to do it, we are also coordinating with them on a day-to-day basis to see if they have funds available, they can go out and do those point repairs right away once we have marked them and identified them, kind of combining our efforts as much as possible. One other effort is a culvert repair in the southwestern portion of one of these neighborhoods, so water can flow as it should out of that neighborhood and into one of these canals, along with the ditch clean out right here. So those are some examples of what we will be doing with the funds that we have, and then some examples of what could be done as more funds kind of come into this area that we want to recommend within this plan itself. Some final thoughts I have that I'd like to present to people here to kind of continue considering is there's a critical need for regional flood and stormwater management in the Metro East. You know, there's the city of Cahokia Heights doing things, there's city of East St. Louis, MSD is doing things, but there really needs to be, you know, some regional flood and stormwater management that helps kind of knit all these different aspects of flood and stormwater management together and helps coordinate and organize this a little bit better than being the kind of piecemeal nature that it is. And hopefully within this plan, everybody can look at it and say, you know, it's not just for the city of Cahokia Heights, it's not just for city of East St. Louis, it's for the whole watershed. And so anybody can take a look at that plan and say, I want to apply for money to implement certain things within this plan. You know, it doesn't have to be us that applies for implementation of this plan. It can be the city, it can be another nonprofit, it can be various different types of groups. And there's also the strong need for community oversight. You know, we've had really good, you know, the residents of this community have been talking about these issues for years. You know, we have working on this plan for the past couple of years, and so we're getting familiar with it. But the people that live there know what the problems are, and they know what the solutions are for the most part. And so they need to be part of the process of making this happen. So, you know, continued community oversight. And we've tried to make sure that's been an important element of our planning process, and we hope that it can continue to be that. And we'll try and work with, you know, EPA and other stakeholders to see how they can apply funds to make that kind of continue. And of course, proper management of grant funds now and in the future is really an important key element of this that we want to impress upon people reading this plan now and in the future. So thank you. I'm John O'Donnell with Heartlands Conservancy. We have an open house where we will be presenting recommendations and elements of this plan on September 19th at Kappa House in East St. Louis. Everybody is welcome to come. And up here is a link to this heartlandsconservancy.org/PDP. This is the landing page for our plan where all of our elements that we've currently developed are there. All our maps, all the previous meeting notes from different meetings are all on that website landing page for this project. So if people want to learn more, they can go on there, download maps and everything else.
Do you have any thoughts on who could be a regional coordinator for the future projects, as you mentioned?
It's hard, yeah. It's hard because I think there's so many different elements to it. You know, I mean, I think the county needs to be involved in this. I think, you know.
We're gonna have to get out.
Oh, of course.
Glad we dropped in on this because working with similar situations here in Missouri, whether it's Coldwater Creek with radiation and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
get in touch. You'll hear from.
Yes, please feel free to reach out.
Glad to drop in on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we have a few questions from someone online. I don't know if it's okay to take those now or wait until the end. Oh, okay.
So you don't have anybody in mind because it's too complex.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, I think there's not one current institution that is the person that needs to be doing it. It might be something that needs to be created specifically for this, or it might needs to be an evolution of a current organization.
Yeah. I'm online. This is Susan Armstrong. My question is, the local wastewater management agency, American Bottoms, are they having anything to say about management of the wastewater in this area?
So the American Bottoms, yeah, so Illinois American Water runs the wastewater treatment plant, correct? That all of this runs to. And so I think they, need to be made sure that they're treating the wastewater and treating the drinking water plants as they should be. But a lot of the issues also lie in the collection system, and that collection system itself is still within the management of the individual municipalities and MASD. So, the storm sewer system and the wastewater system in Cahokia Heights, the pump station, the lift stations, the pipes, the sewers underground, those are still operated and need to be maintained and repaired by the municipalities themselves. But yes, I mean, the wastewater treatment plant needs to be operating as it should. But there's still a lot that needs to be done by the municipalities themselves. Yeah.
I understand you got a 1.5 million Illinois EPA grant to manage this area. And your relationship with the water system and the MESD is who should have been? I mean, because you said, unfortunately not maintained. The resident population is down, the industry is down, and it's unfortunately not maintained.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that? Unfortunately not maintained.
I mean, I am not an expert on the history of the area, but I mean, I think there's been decades of lack of maintenance and investment on every level, from the municipal to the county level, and probably even to the state level too. I think there's a lot of people looking at the area now, and there's a lot of money coming in to the municipalities through state and federal funds that they are also getting separately from us. But I don't know. I hadn't talked to the people to ask them why they didn't maintain the systems as they should have. I think part of what I mentioned is part of it, and that, as that tax base dropped out through both business and, the residents also not as many people living there and paying taxes, but that infrastructure was all still there, as if there was all those people still living there. So it does become harder to maintain that when you don't have the money to maintain that.
Right. So what did the residents say in your conversations with the residents and the community organization about why that area had been so neglected?
I think they say similar things. I think they also, have issues with how the municipalities have tried to maintain them. I think they have issues with how the county has, dealt with the area. I think they have issues with, or they've talked about issues that they have, and wanting to make sure that it's not just the problem of the area and the floodplain, because water flows, into the floodplain, but it also does flow from the bluff areas into the floodplain. So making sure that the areas, on the bluffs and above the floodplain are doing everything that they can to make sure they're not sending any extra stormwater and sediment into that area.
Thank you, John. I think we'll have more time for discussion at the end, but I think maybe we'll move on to Shawn's portion, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Are you okay, Anna, making that shift? I thought, oh, you do have me teed up. That's fine. I had seen in the queue where Allison may have been next, so I wanted to make sure that we had it properly teed up. So, all right. Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having us here today. So Shawn Sullivan, Corps of Engineers here out of the St. Louis District Office. As Anna had said, and I tried to follow orders to really give an update regarding some sanitary sewer infrastructure assistance that we're providing to the city of Cahokia Heights. But based upon John's presentation and briefing that he had, I would be remiss if I did not address some of the areas that specifically that are located within the Prairie to Pont watershed study, where we provided direct technical assistance to the city of Cahokia Heights and East St. Louis. And we'll give a quick update on that based on the nexus and synergy with what's going on with the Prairie du Pont watershed study that you had just heard. So with that, I'm going to step right into the environmental infrastructure program under section 219 of the Water Resource Development Act. So this is an authority that enables us to provide direct project assistance to municipal units of government, county, and then also quasi units of government, such as I'll say Metropolitan St. Louis District here on the St. Louis side. I think we've done something in the magnitude of about 70 million to date in federal support work with them to upgrade their sanitary sewer projects. But specifically to Cahokia Heights, what I would show you is that back in 2001, when this authorization was received, or we had received this from Congress, it only had a $10 million limit. Senator Durbin and Duckworth, we were stuck. We could not help city of Cahokia Heights. There was not even a mechanism to request a increase in that credit limit, if you will, to go from 10 million to 45 million that you see. One of the Water Resource Development Act started to open up some opportunity there. So Senator Durbin and Duckworth jumped on that. And in word of 2020, increased that limit from 10 million to 45 million. So we saw a $35 million increase. With that, we were able to get some bipartisan infrastructure law money based on the administration's infrastructure investment. We're able to scope and identify a particular project in the community. Commensurate with that, Senator Durbin and Duckworth were being, I'll say, forward thinking, looking at all of the needs, not just for Cahokia Heights, but also East St. Louis started to come online with an administrative order consent from US EPA as well. And in what we saw back in December this past year, increased it from 45 million to 100 million. So that doesn't mean appropriation. That just means authorization is basically establishing a credit limit for Congress to appropriate up to that amount. Now, specific to Cahokia Heights, there's sanitary sewer infrastructure problems. There's drinking water infrastructure problems. What type of assistance does the community need? They directly asked us for sanitary sewer infrastructure assistance. So that's where we parked. They're obviously our non-federal sponsors, so that's where we're going to provide support. We can also provide either construction or design, construction, or both. They said we need construction assistance. That assistance is provided on a 75-25 cost share, with the federal government bringing 3/4 or 75% of that total project cost to the community. So with that, basically, we had identified and scoped out with the city roughly about 3 miles in length of a sanitary sewer trunk line starting at the downstream end. So for visual representation, the blue, the map and the highlighted area in blue is Cahokia Heights, Illinois. So one thing I would tell you is that this used to be 3 communities. This was Allerton, Centerville, and Old Cahokia. The city, and some of the questions that John was receiving, took action roughly 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago now, and consolidated those 3 communities into one. And that helps to establish a larger population, larger tax base, so that they can get at some of the sanitary sewer challenges that and other infrastructure challenges that face this community. So we're starting from the bottom up as it relates to the sanitary sewer trunk line. So that red portion is the portion we're doing first. Then there's an additional 6-mile long segment that's been identified for additional work. And the city of Cahokia Heights has been able to secure substantial grants through the state of Illinois to provide further assistance for lift stations and other things. But I'm going to focus on only what we are helping them at this time. So the area in red, in the appropriation this year, we received $3.5 million. That was an earmark from Senator Durbin. We have received the city's cost share in 1.167. So that I'll just say just shy of 1.2 million. So we have that cost share. And then if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, we have executed a cost share agreement with the city. We did that back in May. And then now we're moving through the rest of our process to get to a contract award. So our anticipated contract award, or not award, but an advertisement date is at the end of October. We're still on track to meet that advertisement date with the contract award just after the new calendar year, and then mobilization of the contractor in the February timeframe. And with that, one of the things I failed to tell you was that while we are focused on the sanitary sewer trunk line, we don't have to excavate. The contractor can work from manhole to manhole doing what's called cured in place pipelining. So that's basically an epoxy resin that is inserted into the existing trunk line that then is put under heat or under pressure and then actually molds itself to the actual pipe, correcting any and all deficiencies associated with that. Now, prior to us just allowing the contractor to step in there and haphazardly implement that project, there's obviously, had heard John talking about the opportunity for camera inspections. Our contractor, we will fund that contractor to camera inspect the trunk sewer line before they step in and actually implement. If there are problems that are identified, those problems will be corrected through that contracting process before we mobilize for that cured in place pipelining project. We have a construction completion date targeted in 2025. So that's basically our period of performance. We don't think it would take that long, but it's better to forecast long haul rather than shackle ourselves. And just looking forward, this is future assistance, that this isn't a one and done project. This particular slide shows the queue of what additional work has been requested by the city. Obviously, some additional support with the trunk sewer project. There's a West Interceptor sewer system that was identified. This would directly benefit and support the Piat Place subdivision that we'll talk about in just a moment, and that you also heard John mention in his presentation. With that, our budget packages are submitted. Senator Durbin has supported one of the projects with a earmark, so roughly a $6.6 million earmark that's been identified and is contained within the Senate appropriations bill that's already out there. So we expect those funds to come during the fiscal year 24. Usually will arrive around calendar year March 2024. So with this, I'm going to switch gears real quick. Am I okay on time? You told me 5 to 10 minutes and I may have busted that already.
You're still okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me the hook when I need to stop.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to dial in real quick on an area that John was dialed in on. In fact, we stole one of John's maps here on the very first slide in the what he was calling the Edgemont, Parkside, and Ping Pong area. It's about a 2 square mile area that's within Heartlands Prairie to Pont watershed area. So if you want to know where that area is at, see the red star. That red star really signifies an area or location that's within our East St. Louis levee system, federally protected levied area. With this, we were asked by the city of Cahokia Heights and East St. Louis to provide some specific technical assistance, engineering planning assistance to evaluate this 2 square mile area for some specific flood hazards that exist within the area. We have initiated that process back in mid-July of last year. And then what happened at the end of July last year? High intensity, historic rainfall event that, I mean, just devastated this particular area. We have, since that time, we were able to order up and seek support from state of Illinois, who surveyed and did a comprehensive storm sewer survey of this study area to look at storm sewer condition and then get us some elevations to help us to do some very detailed hydraulic modeling. What I would tell you is off this slide, our report is done. It's drafted. The review is now complete with the cities of East St. Louis and Cahokia Heights. We're ready to finalize it. We're waiting on our commander's signature. There's nothing other than just finding time with our commander to sit down, brief him, and get the signature. And then it is going to go public. So at that point, what is a little bit about the report? What are the findings? We basically looked at 3 alternatives, basically just doing minimal effort to try to get the area to drain. I like the way that John put it earlier with trying to get water away from the structures, away from the homes. So just looking at it on very limited basis, trying to get this study area to properly or positively drain is not going to reduce flooding in the area. If we step it up and we kind of look at a mid-range alternative, intermediate flood risk reduction, we're able to make some improvements, but with those intermediate range, we're talking increased cost. And then obviously with maximum flood risk reduction, bigger price tag associated with making improvements to the area, both for increasing pump station capacity, increasing storm sewer pipe sizes. What we're finding is a lot of the storm sewer infrastructure is undersized based on changed conditions. Change conditions based on rainfall frequency and intensity, but then also based on changed watershed conditions as well. So I think on one of your slides, John, that you had upstream from this location, store and absorb. And so that's going to be important in the bluff area coming down that drains off and comes down into this area. So what we did, well, John was looking at some areas upstream and laying out alternatives. We were looking at specifically how do we treat problems that exist within this 2 square mile study area. Couple quick graphics just to show you existing conditions based upon a 10-year storm event. That's equivalent to about a 4.5-inch rainfall. This is the existing condition of in the aftermath of a storm of this frequency. What does the associated delineated flood extent look like? And so that's depicted here on the map. What I'm going to qualify this with, if I can move my cursor, there's a pump station located here called Parkside Pump Station. There is conflicting information whether that pump station that serves to drain or deep water, get stormwater out of this area, whether it's fully functional or not. But for our modeling purposes, we assume that it was operating at its full 100 cubic feet per second capacity, and you can still see the corresponding delineated flood extent. Now, if we were to implement that maximum, that full risk reduction with all measures, increasing pipe sizes, doing spot fixes, as John had mentioned earlier, we've got that storm sewer network delineated out. You can see a reduction in the delineated flood extent with the exception of some of the area down here in Ping Pong. And that also includes improvement to the culvert structure here that John was mentioning, that this is still some of the lowest of the low-lying area within what's called the Ping Pong sub-watershed. So we want to make sure that we paint realistic expectations with the public that live in this specific area. I'm going to switch 100-year. So if we had a 100-year storm event, that's roughly equivalent to just over 7.5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. All right, flooding is much more exacerbated within this area, much broader extent. The deeper the reds, the deeper the water. And we've seen this over here off the Terrace subdivision. This was areas that was getting footage from local media with feet of water, up to 3 feet of water that were in the homes, first floor living space of about 100 structures that were located within this portion of the study area. If you were to implement full risk reduction measures, again, increased pump station capacity, 275 cubic feet per second is what's needed based on change conditions, but you can update the pump station all day long, but if you can't get the water to the pump station properly, then you still have flooding. So this assumes that we have positive drainage to the pump station, sufficient pipe size diameters with proper inclination sloping towards, because we've seen some of that where some of the storm sewers were not properly sloped and that were causing surcharging and backup. So with that, I will still say that pointing out this area Ping Pong, that's where John, the concept to store and absorb is extremely important for the residents here within the Ping Pong area. So with this, man, I'm killing your time frame.
Maybe just another minute.
Okay, all right. So what I would tell you is that obviously the area that I was pointing to that we just recently provided some tech assistance on is here. We're in the process of wrapping that up. Our next spot is to move into Piat Place. We also then want to look at Harding Ditch, basically where the Schoenberger Creek Harding Ditch intersection is at, looking at about a 7-mile long section of Harding Ditch to look at possible improvements to there, which would then also improve drainage out of Canal 1 and may provide some benefits to the ping pong area in the future. So this is technical assistance that we've already put in a scope of work on. All indications are we are going to get the funding fiscal year 24. So that's right around the corner for us. We expect the funds in October. We'll have a 12-month schedule then to deliver that product specific to the Piat watershed or Piat location, watershed subdivision, and then also along Harding Ditch. And this is a detailed location or picture of that Piat location. With that, the IDNR had already been proactive, stepped forward, did the storm sewer evaluation for us. We already have that information and a condition assessment, which helps to move us along once we have those federal funds in hand. With that regional approach, and I promise this is the last one, just for this is the framing. So this is going to go directly into John's comment, and we did not coordinate this. John had mentioned there needs to be a regional approach. And what I would tell you is that Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth, Governor Pritzker, the mayors are behind a regional approach. And so we are talking that regional option at the highest levels of government. And with that, I will pause there because I don't have the exact clear picture of what that looks like other than conversations are happening to try to take a regional focus, regional approach and bring the resources that are needed into this area to solve some of these larger system-wide problems and challenges that exist. And with that, that's all I have. Sorry for taking so long.
That's okay. That was all great information and very, a lot of information presented in a condensed amount of time. So I appreciate that.
Right.
Now we'll go to Allison Joyce's presentation with the Missouri Botanical Garden Earthways. Changing gears a little bit, Allison is going to be sharing about rainscaping and some grant opportunities there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Allison Joyce. I work to promote sustainable landscaping in the community. So I'm funded by MSD and the Missouri Botanical Garden. We administer the Rainscaping Small Grants Program together. And so I'm going to go really quick, introduce you to kind of residential scale steps that you can take to address water issues on your property, specific features, and then I'll talk about the grant program and if you're not eligible for those grant programs, some resources that are still available to you. Okay, so my version is a lot simplified compared to my co-presenters, but basically we have these water issues because historically we had a lot more green space, a lot more pervious surface that water could penetrate, a much higher tree canopy that would intercept water and then also redistribute water into the water cycle. Contrasting that with what we're dealing with now, which is a lot of impervious surface that water cannot penetrate, increasing the amount of runoff, which carries pollutants to rivers and streams and to our sewers, which is bad for water quality, bad for wildlife, and exacerbates flooding issues. Okay, so that's kind of where we bring in rainscaping. Rainscaping is any combination of plantings, water features, catch basins, permeable pavement, and other activities that manage stormwater as close as possible to where it falls, rather than moving it someplace else. So like in John's presentation, we're going to slow the water down and allow it to soak into the ground by reducing that impervious surface and replacing that with deep-rooted native plants. And this graphic here is from the Missouri Botanical Gardens Rainscaping Guide. So that's a really excellent source that I'm going to reference a lot. And you can get to that by visiting mobot.org/rainscaping. So rainscaping is a whole host of features that you can utilize. And I won't go into all of these in detail today, but just to kind of give you a sense of the variety of features that you can utilize. There's almost always a feature that will work for your site. And again, visit mobot.org to get more details on each of those. I will quickly highlight rain gardens because that's sort of the classic example that you think of when you think of rain gardening, rainscaping rather. A rain garden is simply a garden with a shallow basin. You don't want to really dig a giant hole in your yard. And because you have that basin, you've got a variety of habitats for different types of plants in the deep area rather, plants that can take wet feet like sedges and rushes and things like that, versus on the edges, things that want to dry out a little bit more. So you can kind of get a variety of plants in there. And you need to have a basin to hold the water, a berm to keep the water in, and then of course eventually the water will overwhelm that. So what's going to happen to the water when it goes out, and how is the water going to get there initially? So those are kind of the things that we want you to be thinking about if you're planning a rain garden at home. This is a nice graphic online kind of showing how the water would reach a rain garden in real life. And then if you are interested in a rain garden, there's a number of conditions that you want to meet. You don't want to have an existing woodland. You don't want to take out trees to put in a rain garden because trees are really great at managing stormwater. So keep the trees where they are. You also have to have porous soil that can absorb water at a decent rate. So to do that, you conduct a simple percolation test. Just dig a hole and make sure that that hole can drain in 24 hours. And you can visit mobot.org/PERC for detailed instructions on that. And then you want to make sure that there's some gentle slope so that the water can reach the rain garden and then exit it, but you don't want it to be on a steep slope because that will cause erosion issues on your property. And then the last thing that's not part of this decision tree is that a rain garden basin must be at least 10 to 15 feet from any building with a basement. So through the program, we're checking if it's your house or if it's your neighbor's house. Usually buildings on a slab are okay, like garages, but so those are kind of the boxes that you need to check if you're interested in a rain garden. And I'm just going to quickly fly through some photos here. There's a backyard rain garden. So you can see that rocked area is that outflow for the water. And then the little white circle is a pop-up drain. So the water can come from the gutters in the house and then enter the rain garden. And then this is maybe 9 months later. You can see the plants have kind of filled in. Looks really nice. That kidney bean shape is sort of the classic rain garden. This is a recently installed front yard rain garden. You got the signage from our small grants program, and then also from Bring Conservation Home with the St. Louis Audubon Society and Grow Natives rain garden signs. So we love the signage because it kind of lets your neighbors know what's going on and that you are intentionally gardening. If you can't meet the requirements for a rain garden, you can still rainscape. One of my favorite options is a simple lawn alternative. That just means reducing the amount of lawn that you have and replacing it with native plants. And it might not be lawn, it might be potential lawn, like you have a bare ground area that's too shady for grass, or you have invasive species. And you're going to get a lot of that great impact of stormwater management because you still have those deep-rooted plants involved, but you're just not excavating. So here's an example showing that you can still keep a lot of lawn for your dogs or your running around, soccer playing, things like that, and still dedicate some of that corner that maybe you're not using anyway for native plants. Here's again a lovely front yard. So very colorful and lively, and also I would not want to push a lawnmower up that steep hill. So this person doesn't have to do that anymore. And then also I like to encourage people to incorporate features for people like pathways or benches, stuff that get you outside into your garden to enjoy it, make you more likely to maintain it in the long run. And so I don't have time to go into detail on a lot of these features, but I just sort of wanted to quickly show an instance where the features are working together. So against the fence there is a lawn alternative. And then in the foreground is a permeable paver patio. So that's a patio where you excavate down 8 to 12 inches and you've got different sizes of gravel base layer that create air holes that can store water and allow it to slowly percolate into the ground. So that's a feature that we fund through our programs. And then in the background there's a rain barrel as well. So some people do combine multiple features together, and you can use the overflow from the rain barrel to water your lawn alternative. And so they can kind of work together like that. And then I always never miss an opportunity to plug native plants. Native plants are great at holding stormwater, so that's why we promote them through small grants program, but they also have other benefits. They require less maintenance than exotic plants. You won't need to spend as much time maintaining them. You're never going to need to put a chemical fertilizer on them. You don't need to mow them unless you're in some sort of prairie situation. They have adapted to live here in Missouri and Illinois too. And so they have those deep roots that make them really great at stormwater. That also makes them really drought tolerant because they're way down there in the soil. And then of course, they provide wildlife habitat. So if you kind of think of one thing you can do to be a better person and contribute to your community, one of those things is planting native plants and providing habitat. And they provide an educational opportunity. If you watch a chrysalis on your plants, it's very exciting for kids and adults. And then a sense of place. So you know that you're in the bi-state area based on the plants there. That gives you a real sense of home. And of course, I can't talk about native plants and stormwater without showing this graphic. So that little tiny inch on the left there is turf grass. And so it's showing those very shallow roots. You can kind of imagine that the biomass you see above ground is reflected below ground. So that's not gonna manage any stormwater. It's pretty much the same as concrete in that regard. As you know, in contrast with these lovely native plants that have a variety of root systems that kind of work together to improve the soil, make it more spongy and take water deeper into the ground. So nice visual there. All right, I'm going to switch gears and talk about the grant program. So MSD Rainscaping Small Grants program that we administer. We don't have any deadlines, so accepting applications on a rolling basis. You can submit at any time. It's a $3,000 to $4,000 maximum award for residential projects. We do have an institutional level for nonprofits. Any landowner in the MSD service area is eligible, so first you have to be on the Missouri side. You want to apply and receive approval before you begin work, and it's one grant per person or property, and then these are reimbursement grants. So you're going to be paying out of pocket and reimbursed following quality assurance procedures. So just giving that visual of the map. So you can see kind of that blue area there is the $3,000 grant reimbursement out in the county more so. And then the two green sections are the $4,000, which has to do with the combined sewer systems that we kind of talked about earlier. And then the pink is the Deer Creek Watershed. So my team also administers the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Rainscaping Cost Share Program, but that program is a lot smaller. So just quickly mentioning that here. And yeah, so if you're interested in the small grants program, all the information is on the website. It's kind of a long URL, so you can just search MSD Rainscaping Small Grants. And we've got an orientation system, an application, a handbook that can kind of walk you through the process. We also provide a list of contractors. However, you don't need to work with someone on that list. You can work with a different professional if you want. And we provide a sample design because we have very high standards. So with all of the details that we require on that sample. So even if you're not eligible for the grant program, but you're interested in rainscaping, there's a ton of resources out there. We live in a hot spot for this type of work. So I already mentioned the rainscaping guide by the Missouri Botanical Garden. But if you're into this stuff, you'll want to check out the Shawn Nature Reserve's Native Landscaping Manual. I think it's chapter 2 is all about rainscaping. So that's kind of a textbook version. And then there's also like really detailed plant lists with recommendations there. grownative.org actually has plant templates ready to go. If you have a full sun rain garden, or you want to do a butterfly garden in the shade or something like that, they've got the templates fully ready to go. We love seeing those in the grant programs. Wild Ones is another native plant resource. And then I want to make sure that I plug St. Louis Audubon Society's Bring Conservation Home program, because we don't have the capacity to do site visits for residential projects through my team, but Bring Conservation Home does offer site visits where they will go to your property and make specific recommendations based on the condition there for bird habitat, but that provides some stormwater benefits as well, as we know. And they do serve the Illinois side as well. So I think there's there's a nominal fee and there is a wait list to be on that. And then Zorsi Society and Doug Talamy, those are again kind of native plant resources. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, there's a lot of information available online. All right, that's what I have. If you ever want to reach us at the Rainscaping team, that's our contact information there.
Thank you very much, Allison.
Oh, sure.
I did get a visit from the Bring Conservation Home
Oh,
team.
neat.
Would highly recommend, and I was glad to learn too. I originally assumed that my yard's very small, so it wouldn't be possible really to put a rain garden 10 to 15 feet from the house. But since turf replacement and rain barrels are also part of the program, yeah, I was glad to find out that we can still possibly participate.
Great.
Yeah, so maybe we will, first of all, for our presenters, the microphone in the room is here. So I think they should still be able to hear Shawn, but we'll just double check with folks online. But I will go a little bit back in the chat because there was a question for Shawn about how and where will RFPs be advertised for those projects?
Question. I'll need to get back to him. Who asked the question?
This was Keisha Brannigan.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Takesha. I'm with M3 Engineering Group.
Okay.
So I know usually, and before M3, I was with Volkert.
Okay.
So I, as a business developer, municipalities were, let's just say my niche. It is very difficult to find out where those advertisements will be. So just making sure that everyone has opportunity to bid. I just wanted to kind of know where we need to go to find those.
Okay. And were you looking for the construction work, or are you looking for the engineering design, or?
Not the construction work. We don't do construction unless it's construction inspection, but we do design and modeling and all the other components, the
Okay.
civil engineering components.
Yeah, part of that, I can answer that part. So at this point, from the Corps of Engineers side, the funds that we're receiving are for construction only.
Okay.
The design work is being done by the city engineer, which is the city engineer for, Hirsch Roche for Cahokia Heights.
Got it.
You know, what I would say though, that, you know, the volume of funds that are out there and grant and money and such, if you have a relationship with Hirsch Roche, Jim Nold is senior project manager, maybe wouldn't hurt to make a phone call.
I will do. Thank you.
Yep.
And then there was one question that came in for Allison's program, but I think you may have answered it right after this question came in. Is replacing lawn or turf with pervious patio eligible? I
Yeah.
think you said yes,
Yeah,
right?
replacing lawn with the pervious patio. Yes.
I had a question related to that. Are you looking for a certain absorption or performance standard to justify the payback or the grant?
Well, so the percolation test is kind of what we use, and it's a 1/4 inch per hour, which is 6 inches. And so basically we say dig a 6-inch hole and make sure your soil is saturated before you start. and then come back in 24 hours. And if it's drained, then it's good to go.
So I'm more wondering if somebody's coming at you with like a 10 by 10
Oh, yeah, we have a
patio.
size minimum,
Okay,
100 square feet.
okay.
Which is pretty easy to get to. And then if you're doing a rain barrel, the gallons count as your square feet. So it'd have to be at least 100 gallons.
I will say one thing, just to kind of piggyback on your presentation, is that, all of this is, like what we talk about in green infrastructure, we talked about in the floodplain, the gray infrastructure is very important, draining and flowing and keeping it away. Because in the floodplain, that percolation test isn't gonna work, the high water table, the types of soils they have, so building a rain garden, you can't rain garden your way out of these problems. But doing all these things, above the floodplain and the bluffs, are all things that are gonna be recommendations within a watershed plan, riparian buffers on those streams to reduce, slow down the water. I always talk about water in terms of the energy that it has. If you can slow it down, it's gonna cause less erosion. It can't carry as much pollution, and it's not gonna get to the areas and cause as much flooding. If you can slow down the water, trees are really great, intercepting the water before it hits the ground, that slows it down. So, increasing tree coverage, maintaining tree canopy in areas, a lot of the areas have good tree canopy, so making sure those areas are maintained with tree canopy. And so a lot of these recommendations are really great, and a good example of what is in the project recommendations for those areas, not in the floodplain, but above the floodplain.
That's a good point.
Thank you for saying that. I'm sorry. This is Kakisha again. Being a previous resident of East St. Louis, yeah, those types of things would not work for that area. But thank you for saying that.
Right. And in certain areas, when we do talk about potential green infrastructure, we talk about, like basins for capturing stormwater. And a lot of times, there are green spaces, there are areas that could be dug out a little bit to help capture some of that stormwater. And as part of what we want to make sure we recommend is that these areas, there are a lot of areas that need to be maintained as storage or capture for when it does flood and rain. But that doesn't mean they can't be useless when it's not doing that, like having trails or other areas, there's the possibility for combining, potential for recreation in some of these practices as well, either through a combination of trails or a tiered system where, in the very bottom, it stays totally clear, but in certain areas, you can have certain playgrounds up above. We want to make sure that it's not just saying, all of this area needs to be cleared out. People can't live there and you can't use it for anything. Same thing with wetlands. I mean, wetlands can be great areas for people to go visit and see the habitat, see the plants and wildlife that can live there. So part of a good wetlands restoration in my mind is also having the ability for people to come see the wetlands. So just one of my 2 cents on these projects as well.
Makes sense. And we have one more question online, but I'm not sure of the context in which this was sent.
It was on Shawn's presentation.
Okay, Susan Armstrong, I don't know if you want to come off mute and give any other context to that question. And yeah, we've got a few more minutes for other questions online. Or
I think she was talking about the sewer being.
You mentioned the being undersized.
Yeah, so on the storm sewers, we did see through analysis that storm sewers within Edgemont and Parkside sub-watersheds, some of them are undersized. I mean, just based on volume of runoff coming from the bluffs. I know that the context of the question, I read the question up there, was more about, well, there's a losing population. And if there's a losing population, both from homeowners and from industry, then why are the storm sewers undersized? Well, we need to look at the specific study area we're evaluating, and Edgemont and Parkside, the population loss is not there yet. And if the area continues to be neglected, there will be population loss. And so what I would say is that we need to look at the bluff side drainage that comes in, obviously with that factor in conjunction with the existing infrastructure that's on the ground today, streets, roofs, and then in conjunction with the changed rainfall patterns we see, we found that those storm sewers are undersized.
Yeah, we're only gonna get more intense rainfalls. And also, you know, when you talk about undersized, you know, they're talking about the development above the bluffs too. You can talk about increased impervious surfaces, meaning that water is gonna run faster and it's gonna go into those streams and it's gonna go into that area faster versus sticking around, you know, slowing down and absorbing into the soil. So, you know, increased development can cause increased stormwater flows as well.
So can I add to that? Being a previous resident of Parkside, and also having family members that still stay in Parkside, it's not just one issue, it's multiple issues that have just kind of tumbleweeded into a bigger issue. When you have constant drop in residency from Cahokia Heights, which was Centerville and Edgemont and Allerton and East St. Louis, and then you have an influx of those residents going up the bluff to Belleville, O'Fallon, and those areas, and that water is all running down. It affects the community in a way as to where it's not just being under maintenance and even having the businesses move. It's not that it's under maintenance. There's soot that's there. There's not enough resources to be able to maintain those things. On top of, there's more pressure because the entire area has a combined wastewater stormwater system. So you've got all of that running down from the bluffs on top of what's already in the city, just compiling to be one. You also have the Harding Creek, which has been unmaintained for years, along with the lake that's on the backside that nobody has addressed yet in Frank Holton State Park, that itself pushes water out into the roadway and into the areas. So it's not just one issue, it's several issues. And there are more than, Harding Ditch goes all the way almost around the Ping Pong Edgemont area and almost all the way around Parkside. And it stretches to Marybelle and St. Clair Avenue and comes around. And this has been unmaintained for years. So it's not just one thing, it's several things that have compiled onto one thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Great. Thanks, Keisha.
My pleasure.
Are there any other questions? Well, we in the room are going to, here at T-Rex, we're going to reconvene in the lounge. Welcome everyone to join us for our next sustainability lab about the Regional Climate Action Plan, September 26th. That'll be the same place, last Tuesday of the month, in the afternoon, either on Zoom or in person. So thank you so much to our speakers for taking the time today. I learned a lot. It was a lot of great information. And thank you so much to everyone online for joining us. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you. May I plug once again, we have an open house on September 19th. We'll be presenting this plan and hopefully having technical, committee stakeholders like Shawn and other people being able to table and present kind of what they're working on as well. So if you want to learn more and kind of talk to some of the people in the area about that, September 19th at Kappa House in East St. Louis, 5:30 p.m.
Thank you for adding that. All right. Well, take care, everyone.